Hello and welcome to Snide's Return, a tabletop roleplay podcast. My guests today invite us to explore the wilderness, wildness and weirdness whilst having a killer time with our TTRPG group. They offer us the chance to repeatedly play different archetypes rather than a singular experience. Bringing us wise counsel and charitable generosity, it is time to throw some supplies in a Bergen, set your compass bearing, and prepare for the overwhelming success of this monster venture. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome TTRPG creators, streamers, LGBTQ2 SIA nerds, and all-round fantastic human beings, Josh, Minty, and Richard from Raising the Game. Welcome all of you to the show.
Woo! Hello!
Pleasure to be here.
I'm echoing the woo.
Echoing the woo for sure. Okay, so before we get into some of the things I've alluded to there in the introduction, Josh, why don't you tell us how you first got into TTRPGs, please?
Oh gosh. So I first got into TTRPGs when I was at university. I ended up as part of the gaming society, and then through there kind of played Traveller, the old sci-fi RPG, and then some 3.5 and Pathfinder. Got into LARP, which was a whole different sidetrack. And then a couple of years ago, kind of as the D&D 5e renaissance was starting to happen, my friends sort of got together, and then from there I've sort of built out, and I've got a pretty expansive library of TTRPG knowledge now. So it's cool, being out in the world and discovering all different game systems and what each thing brings to the table. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into TTRPGs.
All right, sounds pretty exciting, and some questions to follow, I'm sure. Minty, what about your good self?
I got into tabletop when probably early teens. A bunch of geeky friends just kind of got involved in that one, and then slowly transitioned into LARP, and then more TTRPGs, and then I met these two weirdos and played some games with them. Yeah, it's just the general run-of-the-mill, met geeks, played game.
Met geeks, play game, love it. And yourself, Richard, how did you form the third part of this trio?
Oh my god. I started playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition, the most user-friendly game in existence, at about the age of 11 or 12 with a bunch of family friends. And then kind of a bit of a glut for a few years, got into 3.5 with a bunch of school friends that wanted to explore it. Again, kind of another gap, and then 5th edition. And then kind of in between, I've just been collecting weird RPGs that I see at book fairs and things like that. Like the Army of Darkness. I've got the Buck Rogers role-playing game somewhere. It's just a collection of weird stuff I'll never play. But these days I fall into kind of much more rules-light, narrative-heavy kind of games, things like that, which I'm constantly kind of browbeating these two about playing with me sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. So you mentioned there sort of the rules-light side of stuff, and that's a nice way to bring us on to the sort of the reason that I've invited the three of you, or the collective as you are, onto the show today. So having gone through sort of your own progression to get to where you are today, to form Raising the Game and put out this product, what has it been like developing Camp Slaughter?
Completely wild. Absolutely, completely the strangest and wildest experience of my life. So it kind of came around where I saw I'd had a couple of conversations with a couple of my RPG friends, people that are kind of involved in Roll for Good, which is a big EU charity initiative. And they were like, oh, I'm designing this and I'm designing that, and will you play test this for me and whatever? And I was like, oh, I thought about maybe writing a game one day, but never sort of got around to it. And then I saw this thing pop up on Drive-Thru where it was like, here's a games jam, you've got 2 months to write a game. And having never written anything of the like ever before, never even attempted it, to sort of go from ground zero to what we ended up with much love and much help from the other two to sort of shepherd me through the experience. Yeah, I'm really proud of what we've written. But it's just been a completely unique and strange experience.
So, having this experience from your perspective, Josh, how have the each of you sort of contributed. Minty, what was your sort of bring into this situation? Were you just safeguarding Josh here, or were you sort of piling in your own inspirations and bringing something else to the game creation?
Honestly, I just kind of showed up. It was pretty much there. They were doing the work. I just turned up and say, "Hey, I'm here as your moral support." No, I joke. I kind of mostly joke. My knowledge base when it comes to horror and that sort of stuff, I love a bit of horror films, and the bonus of having all three of us in this is that we all think in very different ways. So we've managed to put together something I'm quite proud of that we've managed to make and then get out there to the public, just from three very different viewpoints. So Josh would bring in one idea, then I'd take a look at it and say, "Oh, how about this particular angle?" And then Stampy would be like, "Yeah, I like that, but also this." And as a result, it just came up with something that was very, very cool, in my opinion.
So, Stampy, Richard, you mentioned there by Minty sort of having a different perspective to the other two. With your sort of background with your TTRPG experience, how have you found sort of linking with the other two and bringing your ideas into the game's creation?
Well, first thing, I think these two have completely undersold themselves, which is very, very typical for the three of us. So my background is actually, so I'm a games designer, which these two mock me endlessly for.
No,
I think it's pure jealousy. But yeah, so I've sort of got a degree in games design. I tend to focus on sort of very player-centric experience, and then that kind of rolls into this kind of the story's more important than the rules, which goes back to like it's the same rules that the LARP that Minty and I met at. You know, the story is always more important than the rules. If the story's cool, the rules don't count. You know, and that's kind of what it came to. So Josh turned up and was like, "I really want to write this. I don't know where to start." So I basically posed a whole bunch of questions. Josh's encyclopedic knowledge of all these different TTRPG systems turned into us cherry picking things we liked and wanting to play with them. Minty's natural aptitude towards, you know, the experience that he wants and how to get from a situation that he didn't like to one that was working for him, and then accurately predicting like player chaos and like, this is great, but what if someone does this? Because he's a very abstract thinker when it comes to things like that. And then I kind of wandered along behind, like tightening nuts and bolts and giving it a bit of spit and polish, and you know, a third round of have we considered this, and very much echoing the other two, like incredibly proud of what we've put together. We've all run multiple play tests before we even really announced it was happening, and we always finished and sat there and went, "Guys, I think we've got something really special here."
Yeah,
so,
no, amazing.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've mentioned each of your contributions into the whole sort of it's greater than the sum of its parts and all those sort of great metaphors or analogies or whatever. My English language isn't brilliant. However, we haven't actually described what the game is. Wouldn't you like to give us a nice sales pitch of what Camp Slaughter is and where we can find it, where we can pick it up?
I'm going to let Richard field this one because Richard's really good at this.
Okay, so Camp Slaughter is a short-form investigative horror role-playing game that's built on a very rules-light, narrative-heavy system which encourages a group of unlucky campers and one kind of aspiring horror director that we call the Camp Counselor through a short form experience, 1 to 3 sessions. It's not designed for player progression. It's designed for an open and shut, memorable story. It's available on DriveThruRPG. As of right now, it's on the front page. Who knows how long that'll last, but it's on DriveThruRPG. It's called Camp Slaughter. It's an asking price of $12, but half of that is actually going to charitable causes, which I know we'll cover later. But that's very much the essence of what Raising the Game is. We are a charitable, sort of fundraising group who have built an incredible rules light system. I think the real strength of the system is that the rules are light enough that it will suit your table. Absolutely, it will suit your table. If your table wants to play Scooby-Doo, you can do that. But if you're into a more of a kind of Stranger Things, great. Or if you just want to go off and recreate, Friday the 13th or Halloween, but without all those problematic 80s, 90s tropes, we've got you there too. Like, that's the whole point of the game. We've built inclusivity and we've removed these kind of problematic tropes. We're huge on representation and inclusivity. In fact, DriveThruRPG emailed us back straight away going, "Hey, your player characters are depicted with visible disabilities. This is incredible, like absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I think we're making noise for all the right reasons.
Can I also just take a moment here just to shout out Beth, our incredible artist, who absolutely smashed the 6 archetypes in the game, which are kind of, as kind of Richard alluded to, these sort of typical horror movie sort of like the athlete, the nerd, the loner or whatever.
The goth.
Yeah. And basically, like, we were just like, here's the brief for here's the archetypes. Do with what you want. We'd love to see some representation for like queer characters, for people of color, for people with disabilities or whatever. And Beth just absolutely smashed every single picture that they did out of the park. Like, there was not a moment where they posted something and we were just like, no, I hate this. Like, it was just like, it was perfect from the get-go, and all of the images ended up in the book like literally as we got them, basically first time.
The athlete's absolutely my favorite. So
It's all
we
about
mentioned the
buttons.
6 archetypes. The reason it the reason it works so well is there's 6 archetypes, and each of those has 3 kind of classes attached to it, and they're all statted out. There's no stat rolling, anything like that. The characters are all pre-gen ready to go, and all you need to do is put your personality on them. So our athlete archetype image is the basketball ace, except it's this fantastic wheelchair basketball player. It's the first one you see in the book. It's incredibly well drawn, and it still kind of oozes that kind of athletic confidence. Like, there's the whole pose. It's powerful. It's it's I'm here. I'm doing what I want to do, and nothing's going to stop me doing it. And yeah, like 100% mirroring the shout out for Beth. She was incredible.
Absolutely. I've got the image up here, and those that really should follow the links down in the description below, and I'll add some more in a second because I'll get your personal information not personal information, your social information, personal information away. Scroll down through the book, or go through the book if you manage to sort of print out a copy. The image of the athlete with the basketball held aloft over the head, looking in a powerful pose. And again, as you mentioned, a few of the other archetypes have such amazing artwork. The survivor questionably standing next to a bear trap is also great for sort of telling its own story. So with all this in place, all this fantastic artwork done by Beth, as you mentioned there, what are each of your favorite sections in the book? Realize as a whole product you're incredibly proud, but what is something that you feel that is in the book that just sort of resonated with you as a creator?
Can I grab this one?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead.
The monsters, the cryptids, the descriptions of the monsters. You've got those archetypes there of, you can play this sort of thing. This is an idea of how it might work. However, it is entirely up to you. And you've got these different ones on there. You got like without using some of the actual official names, like you got like a Mothman, and then you got the Slender Man type, and you got all that sort of stuff. Obviously, they're not them; they're completely different, but the same sort of archetype for them. And I loved the fact when we were sitting down making this game, and we were going, "Well, I love this thing from this slasher movie, but I also like this one." I was like, "Oh, well, let's come up with a list." And we just did. We just came up with a list of different things on there. And I love looking at that list and thinking, what can I scare the crap out of my players with today? That's my favourite part.
Love it. Love it. What about you, Josh, or you, Richard?
So I really the section that I that kind of, it was basically the last thing that me and Richard did in like fever dream state 2 days before submission, but it actually worked out quite nicely. I thought was we nailed in all of like the camp and how to play the monster stuff like quite late. We had it all we had a Google Doc that we were kind of all working from, because obviously when you're on a Google Doc, you can all sort of share and write at the same time and stuff. And quite often we just like branch out into different sections of the book and then just knock parts out. But the stuff about the camp, I thought I really, really enjoyed it, because it was like in a similar way to where Minty was like, oh, well, if you take Mothman or the Candy Guy or a werewolf, and like how do I slot these like various monster archetypes into these kind of pre-existing boxes with like descriptions for like what they do and how they do it. The camp itself was kind of cool, because it was kind of a fun exercise to go, well, you're going to a summer camp. Presumably at one point it wasn't overrun by monsters. What made it a summer camp? So it was like one of the victory conditions is the games. One of the victory conditions for the game is that you can build an escape vehicle. So we had to make sure that every camp had a motor pool. We had to make sure that every camp had somewhere that people could sleep, somewhere that people could eat, somewhere like a campfire, a communal space, activities and stuff. And I found that when I wrote my playtest, which I'm hoping, because we all wrote a playtest, when we do an expanded version of the book, we can include like the 3 sample adventures that we all wrote as kind of like part of this like expanded book. It was really fun to follow that framework down as I was like making my camp on Dungeon Draft and being like, here's this, tick that off, here's this, tick that off. And then I've run that adventure twice for 2 different groups and had it play both kill the monster and escape from the monster, and it still kind of all worked together and worked out really nicely. So I was really, really proud of that, like that part of the book.
Yeah, definitely. And looking through it at the moment, there's, as you mentioned, a few like the motor pool, the mess hall, rec rooms, and things like that. Were you any of you in your youths into camping? Are you still into camping? Does this sort of play with some of the memories of recent or past experiences that sort of gets the imagination going as well?
Not me. I just ticked off the cliches.
Okay, happy with this.
Yeah. So
for our camping because we go LARPing.
Yeah, that's true. And very often LARPs are held at scout camps as well, so you kind of get you get a feel for those kinds of things as well. And obviously some of this is sort of like romantically Americanized, the idea of having like a tool shop or a farm or whatever on your camp. Like it's it's like a very American ideal of summer camp, because if in a British summer camp it's like you've got an abseiling tower if you're lucky, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an archery range.
Maybe. If they've remembered to maintain it.
Yeah.
So moving with the sort of American theme, and no, not with the American theme, moving with the LARPing and looking at the safety tools, the TTRPG tools you have in the book. How important is it to you as creators to ensure that player and group safety are sort of part of the integral experience of playing Camp Slaughter or any TTRPG, really?
Incredibly. Sorry, I jumped in because I know this is Josh's specialist subject, and he'd have been all over this. But incredibly, here's the thing: like to really push out, you have to be in a position of trust. Okay, by establishing certain lines or certain taboos before a game begins, it allows you to push that area rather than a DM going, oh, I don't know if I should do this, actually. This is a bit close to the bone. The best example of it was I went to an international LARP called Witcher School. And at the start of the game, they sat there and went, hey, so just so you're aware, the original Witcher game, if you slept with someone, you got like a collectible card. Right, and the Witcher universe is about 2 things. It's about killing monsters and the Witcher going around and sleeping with everything on 2 legs. Mm-hmm. And we want to give you that whole experience. So here's the thing: if you flirt with an NPC and they react positively, they'll whisk you away somewhere, and you will get one of these cards. Like, it's slightly risque, certainly not explicit full frontal, but you'll get like a little like, do you know what? Me and you had a moment off in the corner somewhere, and that's. It seemed like a really unusual thing to start with. Like, why would you feel the need to explain that? And then as you start playing, you realize that you're dealing with like 110 strangers in a castle in Poland. And suddenly that kind of flirty aspect, like I'm going to play my character really flirty with someone else's. And rather than me constantly going like, oh my God, am I like, is this not reciprocated? Am I reading the signs wrong? The fact is, there's rules in place to cover that. So if I flirt with them way too much and they're like, we go off in a corner and we do a thing, great, or they say they're not interested or whatever. But the fact is, it rather than making that whole area like taboo, let's not touch it, it freed up a lot of the player base that it basically gave them permission to explore it. And a set of tabletop rules by sitting here going and having your players go, I'm comfortable with this as long as we don't, I don't want sore levels of gore described explicitly, but like if you want to cut an arm off, like I'm not going to cry about that, or do you know what, like, in real life, I have a crippling fear of this. If we could avoid this, this would be great. Can we just not mention this at all? Or, can we treat this as a fade to black moment? It gives the DM an incredible amount of freedom to explore those things, to find what makes your players nervous or excited or afraid, because with clear boundaries, it actually gives you more space to explore than kind of imagining boundaries on yourself and getting to the end of a game and someone going, man, that whole bit with the guy with the hook hand, like, I really wish you'd have pushed that harder. That was awesome. And you're like, do you know what? I felt like people around the table were getting too much of it. So, I think rules, both from a safeguarding the experience, but also enhancing the experience, are incredibly important. And I'm really glad Josh really pressured me to put them in the book. We were on a really tight page count, and it was only by a font change at the last minute that we freed up like a page and a half worth of space. And Josh was like, safety rules, and we sat down and we got all the safety rules in, and I think they've been great. It's been a massive powerful addition to the book that frees up the players and the DM to actually explore themes of psychological horror.
Josh, do you want to add anything more to that?
Yeah, sure, I will. So yeah, like we had, like, as Stampy mentioned, we had like a really, really tight page count, and we always knew that safety tools were going to make it into the book. But I'm really glad that we had that page to do it with, rather than just like, here is a paragraph explaining that you should go Google lines of veils and X cards and please don't be a dick. But part of, as part of the question, I think that like things that are like safety tools are inclusive, because obviously they help you better manage everybody's expectations to start with. So we mentioned earlier, like, you can play Scooby-Doo Stranger Things Friday the 13th, right? If you come and sit down at the table and your counselor has prepared Friday the 13th, but you really wanted to play Scooby-Doo, everyone's going to be sad, because none of the experiences then mesh, right? And then also it gives people that have things like anxiety, like I do, or like other mental health conditions that kind of need certain topics like avoided. They give you the room to know what your boundaries are, but it also gives you, as a GM, it also kind of gives you the room to turn the screws a little bit. Because if you definitely know something doesn't bother a player in terms of their safety, you can really drive the nail home again, I think, with this. Everybody remains kind of safe at the table, but they also get that really like authentic, like crapping their pants, like horror, tension building moment. And the other thing I will say as well, and this is kind of not necessarily on safety tools, but kind of generally on the sort of like inclusivity of the way that we've approached the book as well, is that like we're a bunch of like late 20s, early 30s like guys or whatever. We like a laugh and a joke, but we're ultimately like, something that's really important to us is that like that you get better every day, right? Because something that you said 6 months ago might not be okay to say now, and we correct each other as we go, as things become like not necessarily politically correct to say and stuff like that. And it was really, really important that kind of we sort of try to champion as much of that like inclusivity as possible in the book, to give people that like may have things like disabilities. Like, the last thing that we want is a person with like a disability or whatever to like read our book and just be like, cool, well, if I'm here, I guess I'm just dead, because there's all of the campsites have stairs and there's no wheelchair access or whatever. And it was really important to make sure that everybody could have their fun and everybody could have the same experience, and that it shouldn't make a difference kind of as to who the person is, but it should never be a barrier to entry, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's actually a line in the book that I'm very proud of. It's do you know what, if you want to play a character with disabilities, if you want to play a character in a wheelchair, if that's how you want to represent, 100% we're behind you. And if you say my character is a wheelchair athlete, then guess what, your camp is disabled accessible, and there's no two ways around it. Like, I'm sorry, DM, live with it. Like, like there is no point where it impacts the rules. You will never be penalized for doing it. It is explicit in the rules, and I'd like to say, probably with the full blessing of Raising the Game, that if you have someone in your game that wants to play a disability representative character, and the game experience punishes them for that, we wholeheartedly condemn you.
Yeah, don't play our game anymore.
We don't condemn you for wanting to play the
No, we wholeheartedly condemn the DM for doing it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that's entirely. I know some people say like, oh, we don't know if it's against the authors or wishes or not. It is. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Be inclusive or don't play our game.
There you go. See, that's a great tagline. To be inclusive in each of your social medias, if you wish to promote, where can we find? So we know where we can find Camp Slaughter, Drive Through RPG, and hopefully in numerous other places. But Drive Through RPG at the moment. Where can we find each of you on social media? Can we find each of you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me specifically at Singularity Josh. I'm Singularity Josh everywhere on the internet, everywhere that'll have me. Our Raising the Game Twitter, which is relatively new, is at Raising the Game. The E in the is a 3 because somebody nicked our handle, and so like the only other way you can have it is with an underscore, and somebody nicked that one as well. So
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's not that we were late.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. Minty, where can we find you if you wish to be
The only place
found?
you'll find me is on Raising the Game, which, by the way, is a fantastic small group of people. I only say it because the other two are sat there, otherwise I'd be like, oh, I can't stand them. But yeah, the only place you'll find me is on there. By all means, pop on over.
Actually, I'm going to lean in there and go. You can find Raising the Game on Twitter, but you can also find us on Twitch, where we have a channel. That's where Raising the Game was born, as a charitable fundraising channel, because each of us have streamed in the past, and we saw a lot of people that were raising money, and we realized that what happened is you didn't get that visibility on where the money was going. Somebody going, if you give me 10 subs, I'll give it to charity, and like there's no accountability. So we actually built the channel separate to our own social media, so that we would only fundraise through authorized links and things like that, and we wanted to keep that transparency, and that's how that started. So you can always find Minty there. If we're streaming, he's involved whether he likes it or not. And I'm on Twitter. I'm at exactly. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Richard Stamp Dev, which is I started that while I was in university because I realized that the only way to get in the games industry is good branding. I also have a Twitch channel under the same name, but I've not streamed for about a year because my internet here is terrible. But who knows? Maybe eventually.
All right. Well, I will ensure that links not only to Camp Slaughter, but also your Twitter, both individuals and Raising the Game itself, and your Twitch are down in the description below. So please scroll down, follow those links, support the creators, support the project, support the chat. So you mentioned there giving to charities. Which charities is Raising the Game supporting at the moment, given the time of recording?
For Camp Slaughter, we are raising money for the Centre for Reproductive Rights. We have previously raised money for Calm, Campaign Against Living Miserably. And that's kind of all we've done so far. We are in negotiations to sort of get our next round of our next charity stream kind of up and running. But with Minty being a dad again for the second time, and other general scheduling bits and pieces, because we're like a marathon group. It could be interesting as to how that all pans out.
I'd say last one was 24 hours straight through.
Well,
yeah, sorry, I'm going to jump in here. Josh is being incredibly modest. So Josh is one of the people that sort of came to us with this idea initially. Josh, how much money have you raised for charity now?
So including being involved with Roll for Good, I used to help run Roll for Good as a coordinator. I think it's at last call about £15,000 over the last 10 years or so.
Strong.
Yeah, so Josh is kind of our driving moral compass here, and I wanted to give that a shout out because it's an actual joy to know that Josh does it. Minty has also raised a lot of money for charity as well.
No, I was just going.
Yeah.
I'm the
gesture was
weak
like,
link here.
How is he the moral compass? Come on, I'm like totally the moral compass here.
Right. Yeah. I'm kind of the weak link on the charity fundraising front. But our first live stream, we raised nearly £1,400 for Calm, which was absolutely incredible.
Definitely. Okay, we'll change tack slightly. Not forgetting Camp Slaughter or anything like that, but as content creators now, as game runners, storytellers, MCs, GMs, what advice do you have to those either wanting to run Camp Slaughter or any TTRPG, someone looking to step behind the screen, as it were, for the first time? And your game is so accessible that it's an easy one to recommend. But what advice would you give?
So as far as running Camp Slaughter goes, I think an easy way to make your game successful for Camp Slaughter is to provide enough structure to your players in terms of the flexibility of your clues. So, like, if you've only got the one clue that they need to banish the monster, for example, if that only ever if one piece of the puzzle only ever appears in one place and you have absolutely no flexibility, there's a very real chance that the players just don't stumble across it at all. So I would say like be flexible. Obviously, make sure it makes thematic sense. But I'll give an example of this, right? So I ran my adventure. It was an adventure where they were being chased around by like a typical Jason Voorhees kind of character, and they needed what did they need? They needed a spark plug for the engine for the boat. And so I'd put that in just like a one of the camper cabins, like away, thinking that like maybe one of the kids had like nicked it from the shop or whatever. But a clue that I'd given them earlier alluded to one of the counselors that was kind of involved with the repair shop. So they were like, right, we're going to go to this guy's cabin. Like, we have a name, we have the name, we have the number of the cabin that he was staying in. Let's go and see if we can find it. And so the flexibility of just being able to go, yeah, that makes sense, you can find those there, helps kind of shepherd the adventure along, because a lot of horror GMing, generally speaking, I've run quite a lot of horror games, is all in the pace. Right, if you're too fast, it's not scary. If you're too drawn out, people kind of grow detached. So yeah, flexibility is kind of my my big recommendation.
All right. What about yourself, Minty? Anything you'd like to sort of throw in here?
Don't overthink it. It's probably the simplest one I can give to you. Do not overthink it. You want to run a funny horror game? Then by all means, watch an episode of Scooby-Doo, crack on. That's great. That works just as well as your worst horror film you could ever possibly watch. So try and keep the basic premise simple. You got the monster, you can either banish them or you can find your way out of there. Find those items, put them somewhere on your map, and be flexible as to where they can go. That's all you've got to worry about. Just make it a little bit more suspense if you're trying to go for the horror, a little bit more funny if you're not.
All right. And yourself, Richard?
I love this one. Role play, not rule play. The story comes before the rules. If somebody does something cool, let them do it. It's one of the reasons why I'm most proud of our dice rolling system in Camp Slaughter. We use a system where when you roll, you will either success or fail, but you will do it with or without consequences. So a minor success with a consequence. There's a whole example in the book. I will bring it up and run through it if we want, but I don't think we need to. But the fact is, because it's described as a consequence as opposed to like you do this, but then the other person takes damage or things like that, it lets you keep it narratively fresh. It lets you advance the story. Like anything that comes out to drive the story, to pull people at the table in, is so much more important than any rule written in the book. Every rule written in that book is optional at your table at any given point if following the rule would impact the experience of the game. That being said, it should be treated with a dose of consistency. So what is cool in one moment should not punish a player the next moment, and that kind of folds back into be flexible. But role play over rule play every day of the week.
All right, 100% sort of back that as a message, and the way it's stated in the book is true of what you said there, and something that I like to sort of weave into the games I run when I get the chance to run games. So that's actually a question. With everything you're doing with Camp Slaughter, streams, work, personalized congratulations on becoming a father the second time, Minty. Do you get much time for yourselves to either run games, have downtime, work on other projects? How do you deal with things away from TTRPGs?
Well, very few things that I do outside kind of don't relate to raising the game in some way, shape, or form. Because if I'm not doing a project with these guys, I'm probably playing something with these guys. So it's just yeah, it's just kind of a balance of that. Like, these are two of my very, very best friends in the world, and yeah, like we try and find time to play together as well as as well as work together as such. So that's kind of my answer to that.
What about yourself, Minty? Do you get much time being a father for the second time?
The little time I do get is usually spent with these two fools. So we play random PC games. Josh runs a mean tabletop game. Sometimes very mean. Sometimes
Very mean.
not so mean. Stampy shows up, so that's good. I joke. Stampy's run a couple of games that I've played, and I love sitting at his table. Same as Josh. Josh has run more games than Stampy has for me, and both of them have a very different approach to how they do it. So, yeah, I get to sit at the table with him as well as play some other games.
What about yourself, Stampy?
Yeah, so I generally have a couple of one-shot games ready to go at any given point. We've literally had evenings where we've all sat down to play a game and gone, I don't know what to play, and I'm like, roll the dice, let's go, and like throw them into my rules-like game of choice is called Morkborg. It's an incredibly dark, messy, like Dark Souls meets Darkest Dungeon kind of vibe, but the rules are incredibly light, and it lets you just literally. I mean, I ran one. Was it last week? And I went online and I went dungeon generator, story generator, go, and they were both just like glued to it for like 4 hours.
Yeah, that's not hyperbole. I was having a really, really terrible day with like mental health and depression, and I couldn't concentrate on anything. And Stampy was like, "Cool, we're gonna play Morkborg. I've rolled your characters for you. I've clicked the dungeon thing. We're gonna go play now," and we did, and it was awesome.
Yeah, so
like it was literally like,
yeah,
like
we
spur
found this
of the moment.
great meme.
Like, yeah, it was awesome.
We found this great. It was like an old Tumblr post, and it was like, imagine playing a Dungeons and Dragons game where you start off and like you don't know anything about your character, and you're like, oh, I go to pick this up, and you're like, oh, it's super easy. You're like, oh, I've got lots of strength, or like, oh my god, I'm a Dragonborn. And we talked about it, and we were like, do you know what? It doesn't work for D&D. D&D is restricted by the quantity of its rules. It would make being a spellcaster an absolute nightmare. And then I was like, it would work great for Morkborg, and that's exactly what happened. And I literally threw them in a dungeon, complete amnesia. Here's a couple of blank character sheets. I've got your character sheets over here. Let's go. And then, like half an hour in, someone else joined the game, and they found him sleeping in a corner, and everyone had the whole freak out all over again. Yeah, I tend to run very kind of fast and loose, not always a lot of prep, but again, narrative heavy, rules light. If it's good for the story, do it.
Yeah, you mentioned Morkborg. Great system, great game. I've got the dungeon creator. Dungeon? It's not called dungeon. The dungeon thing and the monster thing on my desktop. Free League seem to be producing, publishing, whatever, some amazing games at the moment. What other games would you like to play, or do you enjoy playing away from obviously working on and repping, as it were, Camp Slaughter?
Funnily enough that you talk about Free League, probably my favorite RPG publisher. I've recently had my Kickstarter for Vesson, Mythical Britain and Ireland, fulfilled. I know Adam because the very first time Adam and I met, he ran me Alien RPG for Roll for Good, which was awesome. And I went and grabbed Alien RPG and the Colonial Marines book, and I've run that actually for Minty since. Minty, a big Alien guy.
Nice.
I own it. Never played it.
It's awesome. We're going to play that sometime. It's amazing. Remind me and we'll work it out. But actually, touching on Morkborg, and I realised we said without Camp Slaughter stuff, but I just kind of, it's just a point I really want to hammer home, is that I'm dyslexic as hell. That book, Morkborg and Cyborg, are a nightmare for people with learning difficulties. And something that we did with Camp Slaughter was because I was like, I'm absolutely not writing a book that like anybody with a learning difficulty can't read. And that Morgborg, as much as it was the inspiration for a lot of the stuff that we did with the way that we did it, this sort of like, narrative first rules last kind of approach, we also took it the other end of things on how to not do things as well. But yeah, so back to the original question, Free League, yeah, Vessen, Alien RPG. There's a bunch of games that I have that I am yet to play. I buy RPGs like they're going out of fashion.
Yes.
I want to play more Beam Saber. We played one session of that. It's a game I really love. But we should play more of that, guys.
We've got our mechs ready.
That brings us around to you, Minty. What do you want to play?
I actually want to play some Pathfinder with these lads. Is one of the games that I really enjoy playing. I've done a few campaigns. I've done some extended campaigns run by a couple of other GMs. And I want to jump into that because I've pretty much already got a story ready to go to run. So just need them to make some characters.
Nice.
Cool. I can do it after this if you like. Cool. Which kind of leaves me as the bit of the black sheep. Really, I don't get to tabletop very often unless it's with these folks. So creating one is kind of put a fire under me. There's a reason I have a whole collection of great RPGs that I have not played and will likely never run. My favorite is on a recent trip to Norway to visit my partner. I found a hard copy version of Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which I think is incredible. The artwork is amazing. Am I ever likely to run it? Probably not. I'm well aware I'm not the target audience for that game, but that doesn't mean that I don't wholeheartedly and completely support it. I've got the Alien RPG, which I think is incredible. The Blade Runner RPG is obviously that went through or is about to kickstart. I'm really keen to get my hands on that when it drops. But huge fan of like that kind of light future cyberpunk, that kind of stuff. But honestly, I'm one of these kind of eternal DMs, and I'll play a game for 3 or 4 sessions and then it'll never match up. So I watch I watched the first episode of Stranger Things and watch everyone get really excited around a table with some miniatures in classic D&D, and I just sit there and feel really sad that I don't have that. So yeah, I'm kind of the odd one out. Like I have a lot of time, and I spend that making other games, like video games. Nice. I just make crap prototypes that never see the light of day constantly. But TTRPG wise, like I'm always down for something new. All
right. Well, either between the 3 of you or between the 4 of us, I'm sure we can organise something.
I will absolutely run a game of Camp Slaughter for you at a moment's notice. Probably literally at a moment's notice.
We can sort out the details after, I'm sure. As we move towards the tail end, where's Raising the Game going next? Where are the 3 of you now? So you've got this project under your belt. You're working, promoting. It's available on Drive-Thru RPG. Links are in the description below. I'm going to sell it like mad. But where are the 3 of you taking this next?
Is it
Josh,
time,
is it
lads?
time? Is it time for the big reveal?
Go on. So, in classic ADHD fashion, I'm halfway through a very intense project with a very real deadline. Ooh. What else can I do with my time? And we had this idea where we were playing, what's it called? Is it called Shredder's Revenge?
Shredder's Revenge.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, which is like a Streets of Rage, like side scroller arcade beat 'em up thing, right?
It's amazing. Honestly.
It's really, really cool. But we were just like, I was like, wow, what happened? What happened if we just took like Saturday morning cartoons, like? And I say cartoons, and the next phrase out of my mouth is going to be like Power Rangers. But like Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Biker Mike from Mars, Animorphs, He-Man, all this stuff, and made a sort of
rule set.
A rule set, kind of maybe borrowing fairly heavily from like Beam Saber, because the way that Beam Saber works is that like you have like your individual character classes, but then you also have a squad playbook where it's like, so you're like assault specialists, or you're a bunch of spies or whatever, and you're set up to kind of, your base of operations is set up to sort of play the different faces of the everlasting war depending on which front you want to fight it on. And I was like, well, what happened? Well, actually it was Stampy, to give full credit. Stampy was like, well, what happens if we take that rule set and then applied that to that concept of being like, let's see if we can divide up like Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,